and welcome back to The Spirit of Watercolor with Linda. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing pretty well, and time for another video. Welcome to all of my subscribers and to new ones who have been checking us out and trying watercolor. I try to make these so they're somewhat quick and somewhat but you get the feel for and the understanding of what watercolors can do, techniques, tips, and tricks. I just wanted to say I've been very much in this place where the art has been such a thing of meditation for me lately. It's such an escape from all the things going on in the world. So I wondered if you might want to join me on this one. I actually, I don't know about you, but if you look on your computer and you look at your screensavers, I have this picture that I was quite inspired by. And I don't know, I think it's because also I like doing paintings where you use mainly two colors and mix them or use them straight out of the tube and create a whole painting. And this screensaver on my monitor upstairs has two colors that I just absolutely love, and it's a moody piece, right? And it has rocks and a landscape or seascape. And what I like about it too is that I can simplify it. I mean, you can see all the rocks. I'm not going to put as many rocks. I'm trying to get the mood of the color. I'll probably do a background in there. Oops. Oh yeah, like that. And yet there's this huge rock with trees growing on it here. I don't know how much of that I want. I just want some kind of a little mountainous or rocky background there. But simplifying it, but mainly to get those gorgeous colors and to show you what I'm going to do. We're going to take Payne's Gray and Quinacridone Gold, which is actually a very common color in watercolor, which I'll tell you more about. So those two colors, and we'll go to the table. So please join me, and let's do something that puts us in this state of mind that is meditative, that is calming, has this kind of glow of warm light in it, okay? That's that Quin Gold. And we'll create this beautiful place and space for ourselves. Something you could also put up so that when the world is kind of getting anxious, or sometimes I get anxious listening to the news and things like that, you can put this in a place. I may hang it in my bedroom where I can look at it and feel that peace and that warmth and that just beautiful spiritual thing. So just looking at my palette, here's my Quin Gold and my Payne's Gray. And, to do the sky, I'm going to do a soft wash of those in there. I always want to prop your board up a little bit. I put a little angle in there. I might actually put an eraser there, and that should do it. Using Saunders paper again. It's my best paper right now. Been trying Hanamola, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it right now. I guess some papers just do what you want, and I have to get to know that one. I started a video, and I just didn't know how I felt about it. So, okay, so I'm just coming in and wetting this up to the horizon line. There's some little hills or mountains back there in the background, and these ones up here. And then down here you see some more rocks, but not as many rocks as there were. I might add some, as I go if I decide that it's not enough, because we have a lot of water here. And so, not to make too long of a video, I do speed it up some so you can get the information. But you can see the strokes I'm doing and the techniques I'm using, and I'll explain as we go along. So yeah, the big flat brush, I wet the top where the sky is, and I come in there with the beautiful Quinacridone Gold, And, you know, my photo shows it mainly that color on the right, and then it kind of fans into this beautiful mixture with the Payne's gray. So, you know, I'm just kind of following that, but not exactly. And, you know, leaving some of the gold in the sky there. And I also, I have to always excuse my head for coming in and out because I have the ring light overhead and sometimes I have to get close. But usually you can see what I'm doing and you can see my brush. Using the pointed round, large pointed round sometimes now, getting down or actually just getting into the sky with it and letting it just fan out, still wet, wet on wet technique. Brought a little in on the right, looks like there. And yeah, then I let that kind of set up. The Saunders paper does tend to like to dry, or I'm sorry, to absorb a lot of the water and as it dries. So you can come back in if you want it stronger. You know, I'm kind of opting to not do that because sometimes I can lose, or we can lose, the freshness of the wet on wets. So it's a choice, you know, or you can let it dry and glaze back over. Okay? And then I just was bringing in a little bit of rock formation in the water in the background there. Not a lot yet, and softer of the Payne's gray. Again, 2 colors only here, right? And bringing in some stronger color of this Payne's gray into the rock formations, the rocks in the foreground. You can use, and I kind of wish I had remembered to grab my palette knife and paint with it, but I will do some of that in the rest of this painting. Here I was just using my brush, and you get more rounded rocks, but if you want them to be kind of chiseled edge, you know, flat shaped rocks, then you need to think about maybe trying your palette knife, which is a wonderful way to get fresh, beautiful strokes that look very rocky. So we'll go to that down the road. Now also I wanted to mention that I'm, you know, going back and forth because I was letting the sky dry, but then the bottom half I could work on because it wasn't wet and didn't need to dry, okay? I'd wet small areas like under the rocks in the water so that I'm using the Quinacridone gold down there and letting it flow like water. And, you know, my water in this is gold and gray, and, you know, it's just the way the sun hit and how it looked. So that's what we're doing. And again, moving in and out as I'm, you know, as the painting is beginning to dry at the top, I'm starting to think about going up there now and working in some of that beautiful gold in a soft wash again in the background. And when you look at the rocks here, I want to show you that I was working on my Hanamula, trying that paper I told you I bought, and comparing it with this one we're doing together. And I did some rocks with the palette knife. Forgot what it was called. And, you know, just you can put the marks on much more definitive, and you get the sharp edges of some of the rocks. And that's how they do look very often. Sometimes they're curved and rounded, so you can go either way with your brush or with these strokes from the palette knife, which you will see here I use in the foreground on some of the rocks, and then I'm going to go back to the background where there's some rocky land formation back there, a little bit closer on the right side than the left side where we have the hilly little land masses. So I'll come up there too with the knife in a few minutes, and you'll see me work that as well. I did need some more Payne's gray. I was really using a ton of it, so I have a lot of paint, so I sometimes have to remind myself, don't be shy, get it on the palette. I think we all need to remember that, right? Otherwise, you just can't get the paint on the paper like you want. You can always lift it out just take a paper towel and press and lift. You'll see me do some of that in the rocks down there on the foreground sometimes, because I wanted them stronger than the background, but I sometimes, as all of us can, get a little heavy-handed. Sometimes you have to lift it back out. So that's okay. I consider taking a paper towel and lifting a watercolor technique. Other people call it fixing your mistake. I don't look at it that way, because I think that kind of is discouraging when we think, oh no, I've got to fix this. Instead of going, oh, I just have too much value or too much color, I'm just going to lift it back out gently while it's wet, and it works well. And you can see here that I am adding some Quinacridone gold here and there, just to start to bring in some of the water there under the rocks. I let the Payne's gray flow into the water sort of like underneath the rocks, not sort of, but underneath the rocks, and it creates the reflection of the rocks in the water. And then, bringing in some of that quinacridone gold and letting them blend together. They call that variegation, when the colors blend together. They just run into each other, is what that means. And it's a beautiful thing with watercolor. Going back and forth from the top up there of the painting and down into the foreground. Because, you let one thing set up and dry. Ooh, there's some quin gold back there now. And then again, I'm bringing in some Payne's gray and variegating it in the background into that gold I just laid into the water back there. And I was tipping the paper back and forth. That helps the paint, move from side to side and blend better. So you can move it up or down, lift your board if you want things to go down like the sky, the gravity. And then side to side you can tip your board, if you want the paint to flow nice and evenly. And here we are back in the foreground, just probably overdoing it with the rocks, I'm not sure, but I was just trying to get them a certain way, and when I look at the video I realize that I probably don't need to do as much as I'm trying. I'm just thinking they're so close in the foreground that some detail is important, right? But again, those hard crisp lines and from the palette knife have really given us a lot of the detail, and the Payne's gray, the granulation, is really giving us a lot of the rocky, the way the rocks look, the surface of the rocks. You can see here how I lift out to bring a little light back into the rocks, they can get a little too much color. If you vary the amount of color, the value, you see a little more of a shape of the rocks. And you also saw me tip the board from side to side just to help the paints flow a little more evenly when I was doing the water up at the top. Also, I am adding a little of the quinacridone gold into the rocks here and there too, just because, you know, if they're wet, then the watercolor can reflect into the rocks as well. I'm in hopes of finishing up our video today on a meditative piece, and we have here some beautiful rocks to finish here in the foreground, and here maybe coming down from these rocks over here over through the water, and then finish our scene. Again, I'm trying to keep some of these whites, so always being conscious of that as well, and getting our palette knife wet and starting to come back in here with our, got a little dried up on the palette since let things dry. And to keep the video from getting too long, I have to speed it up again, but I think you can see what I'm doing, the strokes, the brushes, and the palette knife, kind of like we did before. But, you know, you do get those more surefire strokes from the palette knife, so give that a try if you haven't. It's really kind of fun, and you don't know exactly how it's going to work, but it always ends up working really nicely. And to finish things up, I'm bringing in into the just wet, you know, I just wet where the water is with my clear brush, and then coming in with some of that Payne's gray just to show some soft reflection of the land in the background there. And you can add as much as you want or as little, you know, of the gold and the Payne's gray into the water. I want to keep it soft and smooth. Again, that meditative, relaxing state is the goal here. You know, if I get too crazy with the clouds or the water, then it becomes active, right? You know, horizontal lines are quiet and calm. And if you want action in a painting, you want diagonal lines and so forth. So that's another tip for you right there. I did add some of this opaque white in the foreground. I felt like my rocks were getting a bit heavy, and I always keep opaque white around just to kind of bring the whites back. There's still white kept in here and back in there, and I was losing it in the foreground. So I just wanted to say that yeah, I'm just taking my flat brush now and just kind of making this soften up underneath, and I just dabbed it in, you know, just dropped it right in, and I kind of like it, except that it needs to flow a little better at the bottom, that's all. And then we'll be pretty much, I think, finished. Hope you like this video, and we'll keep coming back.